Candace has said versions of this before, but this time it feels different. Not louder, not more dramatic, just sharper. And that's because now, Erika Kirk has stepped into the spotlight herself. New interviews, new explanations, new certainty. And whenever that happens, the questions don't slow down. They multiply. Some of the questions being asked sound carefully prepared, almost rehearsed. Others feel more spontaneous, like someone thinking out loud under pressure. But no matter how they're framed, one thing is clear. People are paying attention again. And when it comes to Turning Point, that attention hasn't been kind. Every time a new detail surfaces, there's an immediate response. Sometimes too immediate. As if the goal isn't clarity, but control. What makes it harder is that those responses don't always line up. One person says one thing. Another person jumps in to adjust it. Then a third person adds context that somehow creates an entirely new version. Watching it happen in real time feels less like transparency and more like a scramble. It starts small. A comment made casually. A statement from someone close to the situation. Then suddenly, someone else feels the need to jump in and clarify. Blake says one thing shortly after the incident. Then Andrew steps in and redirects the focus to another angle entirely. That leads to Rob offering his explanation, which sounds confident until Mikey steps forward and says, "That's not how it happened." And just like that, the narrative shifts again. What makes it unsettling isn't just that people remember events differently. That happens all the time. It's how quickly the stories adjust once public attention turns up. It feels familiar, like watching major media figures glide past obvious inconsistencies without ever stopping to correct themselves. Nobody pauses and says, "I got that wrong." They just keep moving forward, hoping the audience doesn't rewind. That's the feeling people can't shake here. A sense that no one is actually slowing down long enough to address the contradictions. Even when something doesn't add up, it gets brushed aside and replaced with the next explanation. The truth doesn't seem to slow the process down at all. It just gets absorbed and reshaped. That pattern has followed this situation from the very beginning. From the moment Charlie passed, the messaging has been steady on the surface but unstable underneath. And the most uncomfortable part is that multiple people have now said Charlie himself believed something bad might happen to him. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, in private conversations. Candace has said that clearly. She didn't hear it directly from him, but she says 3 people did. She's careful about how she says it. She emphasizes that those conversations were off the record. She refuses to name names. And she repeats one thing over and over again. If she says something is off the record, it stays that way. But she's hoping that others, people she believes are good, will feel compelled to step forward on their own. That alone creates tension. Because now there's a gap between what's being claimed publicly and what's being discussed privately. And when Erika addressed this in her interviews, instead of closing that gap, it widened. Candace repeated her point. Erika responded. But when you put their words side by side, they don't line up. Not emotionally, not logically, not even chronologically. It feels like 2 people describing completely different realities. And once you notice that, it's impossible to unsee. Sitting there, piecing everything together, watching old clips, rereading statements, something starts to stand out. Candace mentioned a white knight, someone who supposedly received a message before everything happened. A message that could change how people understand the final days. At first, it seems obvious who she might be talking about. There's one name that's been there from the very beginning. Someone deeply embedded in Turning Point's early success. Someone who supported the organization publicly, financially, and symbolically. Someone who praised Candace often and defended the group whenever criticism came their way. It feels logical to assume it's him. But then reality creeps in. Because if that person really did receive a message like that, stepping forward wouldn't be a small decision. It would place him at the center of everything. The scrutiny, the questions, the timelines. And once that door opens, people don't stop at one question. They start connecting dots, looking into relationships, business ties, personal history. That kind of attention doesn't just affect public image, it spills into real life. So maybe silence makes sense. Maybe staying quiet isn't guilt or deception. Maybe it's self-preservation. Still, something about it doesn't sit right. Because when every clue seems to point in one direction, but no one confirms it, the mystery deepens instead of fading. Then another name surfaces. Quietly, almost unnoticed. Harrison Smith posted something before Candace even brought up the White Knight idea. He said he'd heard from someone close to Charlie. Someone who warned that Charlie believed a certain person might try to take him out if he ever turned against them. That's not vague. That's not poetic. That's incredibly specific. The timing makes it even stranger. The post appeared either right before or right after everything happened. And yet, no one really followed up. It floated around online for a bit, raised a few eyebrows, and then disappeared into the noise. At the time, it felt too detailed to ignore. But somehow it was ignored anyway. All of it together creates a chaotic picture. Different people talking, contradicting each other, posting cryptic statements, then going silent once attention intensifies. It's a swirl of half-truths, rumors, and unresolved claims. And nobody wants to be the one standing in the middle when the storm hits. That brings us back to Erika and the messages Charlie supposedly sent. Her explanation sounds straightforward on the surface. She says she checked his phone. She says she didn't find anything like that. She says definitively that he never said those things. But the more you think about it, the more questions it raises. How would anyone know where to look? A phone like Charlie's wouldn't be simple. Hundreds of conversations, thousands of messages, group chats, emails, different apps, different platforms. Searching through all of that isn't quick or easy. And it's not like there's a single button that pulls up every message someone has ever sent across every app. Even if she genuinely tried, even if she spent hours scrolling, could she really be certain she saw everything? That confidence feels less like a conclusion and more like a strategy. When someone leads with authority, people hesitate to question them. "I have his phone," becomes a conversation stopper. But logistically, it doesn't guarantee completeness. Most people have unread messages on their own phones, unopened emails, old threads they forgot existed. Now, imagine multiplying that by the life of a public figure, a CEO, a media personality, a husband, a father. There's no realistic way his digital footprint was small or tidy. And there's another layer. What if those conversations didn't happen over standard text messages at all? What if they happened on encrypted apps? Platforms that don't sync automatically. Apps that require separate logins or backups. Even if someone had physical access to the phone, that doesn't mean they had access to everything on it. That's why Erika's certainty feels shaky to some people. Not because she's lying, but because the logistics don't support the level of confidence she expresses. It sounds less like clarification and more like an attempt to shut the conversation down before it grows any further. And then there's the line that keeps resurfacing. "They're going to get rid of me." Why bring that up at all if it never existed? Why address it so directly? Grief could explain some of it. Losing a spouse suddenly would leave anyone disoriented. Wanting the speculation to stop is human. Wanting peace is understandable. But logic still matters. And when you place her explanation next to other accounts, the cracks show. Frank Turk has spoken openly about threats, about pressure, about conversations that happened weeks before everything went down. According to him, Charlie said something unsettling as early as August. Not the day before. Not in a panic. But earlier. Calmly. Seriously. And if you rewind further, the context becomes important. July wasn't a quiet month. Turning Point hosted a major event. Big names, big donors, big opinions, tension behind the scenes. After Tucker Carlson spoke, a donor reportedly confronted Charlie directly, told him he couldn't do what he was doing. That kind of confrontation doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from influence, from leverage. Then August arrives. And suddenly, Charlie is telling close friends that people are questioning his loyalty, accusing him of betrayal, suggesting he's on the wrong side. He doesn't understand it. He keeps saying the same thing. He's American. He represents the country. Why is that suddenly not enough? Those accusations reportedly weighed on him heavily. He told people he was getting messages challenging his morality, his decisions, his direction. At some point, he mentioned increasing his security. Not casually, intentionally. That detail matters. Candace shared similar claims. She says Charlie sent messages expressing fear. She says she verified it with multiple people. Frank says he received a call and a text. None of that sounds random. It sounds like multiple people describing the same underlying concern in different ways. That's where Erika's version stands apart. If Charlie said these things to close friends, if he sent messages expressing fear, how could she be so certain none of it existed? Especially when those claims align with a broader timeline of pressure, tension, and conflict. It creates two realities, one where everything is calm, controlled, and accounted for, and another where Charlie felt cornered, doubted, and possibly threatened. When those realities collide, trust becomes fragile. Looking back at his final week only adds to that feeling. He wasn't withdrawn. He wasn't quiet. He was energized, encouraging others to push harder, telling people to go all in, supporting voices that challenged the status quo. That doesn't look like someone at peace. It looks like someone bracing for impact. Then there's the conversation with Ben Shapiro. Watching it now feels different. The tone is tense, layered. Charlie seems like he's circling something he wants to say but can't quite land on it. At one point, he makes a comment that shifts the room. Ben's reaction says everything. That wasn't a comfortable exchange. Around that same time, Charlie reportedly sent messages saying he might need to distance himself from certain people, hinting at issues with donors, saying he didn't want to be bullied or boxed in. Those aren't throwaway comments. They reflect someone under immense pressure. So when Frank says Charlie told him directly that he believed people wanted to harm him, and when Candace says multiple people received messages expressing fear, it forms a consistent picture. One that fits the timeline. One that explains the tension. One that makes sense. Erika's denial doesn't erase that picture. If anything, it sharpens the contrast. And while it's easy to understand why she'd want all of this to stop, denying it outright has had the opposite effect. It's made people look closer. Maybe she's exhausted. Maybe she's protecting herself and her family. Maybe she believes that if she says there's nothing there, the noise will fade. No one can fault her for wanting peace. But peace doesn't always come from certainty. Sometimes it comes from clarity. And right now, clarity is exactly what's missing. Candace has said repeatedly that if anyone can prove she's wrong, she'll stop. That's a bold stance. So far, no one has produced definitive proof that she fabricated these claims. Instead, the response has been avoidance, redirects, emotional appeals, statements that sound final but don't address the logistics. That's why people keep digging. Not because they want chaos, but because the story doesn't feel finished. Too many pieces don't fit. Too many voices say similar things. Too many moments line up too cleanly to dismiss. Whether Erika is distancing herself intentionally or simply trying to survive something unimaginable, her words have become part of the mystery rather than the solution. And until someone bridges the gap between these conflicting accounts, the questions will remain. Because when timelines align for some and not for others, when witnesses corroborate each other quietly while official narratives stay rigid, people notice. And they won't stop noticing. This story isn't over. Not because of drama, but because unresolved truths have a way of resurfacing. And until someone finally connects all the dots, the final weeks of Charlie's life will remain exactly what they are now. Unsettling, incomplete, and impossible to ignore.